Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Xaereth Prevails, a Grand Arena story. This is currently episode 11 out of 12 in the current Grand Arena Championship, which means that we are almost done. We're in the home stretch. We have 2 total matches, including this one, until we're all the way done. We're in the semifinals because I managed to win the last round, and I am matched up against a guy named Darth Snake. As I was kind of talking about last episode, I've basically made it into Khyber. I need to be able to full clear both of my next rounds, or at least mostly clear, but because I've gotten 10 wins, that kind of puts me over the threshold to be able to get into Khyber, and so it kind of puts me in an interesting situation where I can get into Khyber with a minimum of effort, and some people have actually suggested that I kind of give my opponents the wins so that they are able to get into Khyber as well. And now I understand that sentiment, and it is it would be kind of me to be able to do that, but in the end, I want to be able to get as far into Khyber as I possibly can. I want to get as high in the rankings as I can, and I want people to be able to earn Khyber. Otherwise, it's really not worth trying to strive for it. So basically, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try to win.
Mercy is the mark of a great man. Oh! Oh! Guess I'm just a good man. Oh! Well, I'm all right.
Moving into this round, I was at 10-0, which is great. I wanted to be able to keep that record going. I've won 10 in a row, obviously, and I wanted to get my 80th win in Grand Arena, and that's overall. That's since Grand Arena started. I've kept track of it. You can find basically all of my videos and all of my matches on my YouTube channel if you want to check that out. I've also put them on my GAC counter sheet, which you can find in the video description. Looking at our stats, my opponent and I were actually pretty evenly matched. They had 6 more Zetas, which is uncommon, but they had more than me. We had about the same number of mods. I had an advantage in gear, and I think they had a slight advantage in relics. And so I really do think that our 2 forces were actually pretty closely matched, and in terms of like total banners and wins and everything, we were very evenly matched. I had a slight edge in a couple of them, but overall, like my opponent had a pretty high degree of skill, and I needed to be cautious of that going in. My opponent's front line was a kind of interesting blend of really strong teams and relatively weak teams. I wasn't really sure what to make of it, to be honest. They had a Newt team, which the Separatists are always tough to deal with, and then they had a Karth team with L3, which means that they're going to be a little bit trickier and harder to deal with, but not that much harder. Ewoks, which weren't anything too special. They didn't have really high gear or speeds. They did have okay speed. And then they had Night Sisters, which are always tricky. Before I was able to attack, however, my opponent started hitting me, and I did manage to get a few screenshots of that progress, so they did manage to take out my Night Sisters first for 57 banners, and then they kind of stumbled against my Emperor Palpatine team. My opponent later told me that they used Jedi Training Ray to be able to take out that Palpatine team. We'll take out Palpatine, and that's it. And then used Bosk to be able to finish off the squad. And so I did manage to steal a win there, which was great. Great result, obviously. You always want to be able to steal a win because that's 20 extra banners. That provides a pretty good buffer to be able to use against your opponent's teams as well. The next team of mine to go was my Newt team, which had won 4 different defenses before being taken out on the 5th defense in my last round, and then my Bosk team with Watt was also taken out. My opponent actually did a really good job of clearing all of my squads. After that initial stumble against Emperor Palpatine, I actually didn't end up defending against anything. My opponent one-shot everyone, and they even used a Kira Nest team to be able to one-shot my Geonosians, which I thought was really interesting, and I appreciated the insight to that. My opponent had a Relic 7 Nest, and I had figured that would be on defense, but it's a pretty good use to put it to be able to solo my entire Geonosian squad. I've had a couple people ask me recently about if I was ever going to use Imperial Troopers to actually counter Night Sisters again, and I get that complaint. I definitely have a good Imperial Troopers team, but they're not as good as some of my opponents' Night Sisters teams, and so I've been using other squads to be able to counter them. But in this case, I thought I could risk it. My opponent's Night Sister speeds were not really crazy. I have it timed perfectly-ish so that my Stark goes first. He feeds turn meter to everyone. Death Trooper then goes and throws his grenade. He dispels zombie, reduces cooldowns or increases cooldowns on the entire squad. After that, it's kind of a turkey shoot. Everyone has turn meter. Range Trooper goes, I guess, next and gives everyone buffs. And then all the troopers are pretty loaded with turn meter for the rest of the match because as you're defeating guys and taking them out, you're able to gain more and more turn meter. And even though the Night Sisters are gaining turn meter every time you take out one of the Night Sisters, it's not really enough turn meter to be able to warrant anything too crazy. They do get a couple hits off, but you have counter, you have all this other good stuff. Assuming that Asajj doesn't go and dispel everything and reduce all your turn meter, which can be disastrous at times, you can get the win pretty easy here. And so I was able to win that one. I wasn't really sure what to take against the Ewoks at first because I haven't really seen them for a while. Like, people don't put them on defense very often against me, and so I had to think for a while because I have traditionally just used kind of cleanup squads to be able to take them out. Being able to use my Imperial Troopers is not really part of the equation anymore because the Imperial Troopers are kind of too strong for these guys now. So I took my Jedi Training Ray team without BB-8 because my Jedi Training Ray was still faster than any of their characters. Now, Paplu was faster than any of my other characters, however, and so I needed to make sure that I did my mind trick on him, reduce his turn meter, and then you want to stun Logray right away because Logray has the daze and you don't want to have to deal with that. And then you want to take out Ewok Eldar as fast as possible just because he is the guy who's really going to give you problems. Like, if he's allowed to remain intact, then he's going to dispel everyone and or not dispel, but cleanse everyone, and then the turn meter train starts, and you're in a huge amount of trouble. And this resistance team is not necessarily very resilient. None of them have a lot of survivability other than Jedi Training Ray, and she's not enough to turn the course on her own. And so you can see here, I'm just kind of playing control games. I'm trying to just stun everyone that I can, just trying to control it, and daze people, trying to reduce turn meter when I can, and just bounce around trying to get hits in wherever I can. And so I was able to take out Ewok Elder pretty quick. Wicket was the next in line because of how much damage he can do, and he can call an assist. After that, you just kind of bounce around and see which guys you can counter and everything. I did get one hit on Resistance Trooper, which I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to still get full banners, so I used Finn's special to be able to heal him, and that worked out. 60 banners, pretty easy. Moving into the next zone, I had a perfect score so far. I wanted to keep up that momentum, obviously, and my momentum was going to kind of pause for a little bit just because there was a Geonosian squad and my opponent's full Darth Revan squad, which included a really high relic Malak. And I didn't necessarily want to see that in that zone, but I do have my own Darth Revan squad, so I wasn't too concerned. Now, before I brought the righteous hand of Xaereth down to smite the infidels in the back zone on the top, I wanted to take out the first zone in the front because I wanted more complete information here. Just in case I was able to use Darth Revan in some other circumstance. I wasn't really sure what circumstance that might be, but it's always better to just have more information. I was going to have to clear that front zone anyway, so may as well just knock it out right now. So I needed to figure out what teams I was going to be able to save for the last zone. I wasn't really sure what there was going to be in the back. Typically, it's a pretty good guess to be able to put General Grievous squad in the back. People generally do that. I mean, I do that. And then I thought maybe my opponent would put First Order Bounty Hunters. I also thought, and I didn't put this on the chart, but I thought that maybe they had clones back there, which would have been less than ideal. And so I wanted to leave Padme for that, just in case I ran into something like clones. I didn't want to have to kind of go into that with a subpar squad. The Darth Revan match was going to be pretty obvious. I wanted to use my own Darth Revan because none of my other teams were necessarily as up to taking on my opponent's Darth Revan as my own. And I did have the right speeds and everything to be able to beat them. The Geonosians, I could have used CLS to be able to take them out. I like to be able to do that sometimes, but Traya was probably going to be the better option because Traya can really lose a lot of banners against the Newt Separatist squad, which I've done recently. I've had to face them, and so I wanted to try my Commander Luke team against the Newt Separatists, just to be able to hopefully get an Alpha Strike and take out like Dooku right away, something like that. And at the very least get a stun at the very start. And the Old Republic with L3, I had First Order left. I had no idea what was going to be in the far back zone, but First Order needed to be used, and I needed to use up First Order if possible here, and this was a great opportunity to use them up. Sometimes when you have a certain squad available and you have to use them, like you've kind of factored them into they have to be part of your offense or you're going to be unable to full clear. You want to be able to take a team that they can take. So whereas any of my remaining teams could have probably taken this Old Republic team, other than maybe Phoenix or Ewoks, I really wanted to be able to use First Order because I didn't even know if I'd be able to use them in the back zone. So I wanted to try my Commander Luke team first, just because it was probably the biggest unknown. I hadn't really taken Commander Luke against a lot of Newt teams. I definitely have done this counter a few times, but it's kind of a bigger question mark than taking First Order into the Old Republic team. To be honest, the Old Republic team is a known quantity, and First Order is a well-documented counter for that, so I wasn't that worried about that, but I did want to be able to take my Commander Luke into this team first, just in case something did happen. I wanted to take out Dooku first because he has all the counters and stuns and can really kind of wreak havoc with all of his different things. Fortunately for me, my opponent didn't have necessarily very many hit points on Dooku, so I was able to just one-shot him right out the gate, get that Alpha Strike in. I really wished I was able to just take out Newt, and actually if Newt had been a higher gear level, I might have just taken the chance to just stun him, just because doing all of his extortion stuff could be really frustrating. After that, I just kind of took the targets that presented themselves. Baze did an AoE and kind of just offed himself, and I couldn't really target Jango until his Bounty Hunter Resolve thing was gone. I guess it wasn't Bounty Hunter's Resolve, whatever the buff is that he gets for his contract, that meant that I couldn't do damage to him for his first 2 turns. So eventually it did take me 2 turns to be able to kill all of his buddies anyways, and so after I was able to take everyone else out, Jango was just kind of hanging out there, and 55 banners there was an okay result. Being able to get through without losing anyone is great. I would really like to find a different character other than Captain Han, because even though he does do a couple things that I really like there, he's not really adding anything at this point. I had already planned to be able to take out this Old Republic team with First Order, and so I just jumped straight into the fight. And L3 has this pre-taunt, so that means that I can't really mess with the rest of the roster until I've cleared that taunt. And so I'm doing the AoE. I gave turn meter to Kylo Ren to be able to do his AoE. The AoE then gave all the rest of the First Order guys turn meter. And so now we're just trying to kind of just mess around and get stuns where we can, be able to just take down some protection on different characters. I really wish I had been able to stun Mission there before she went stealth and blinded Kylo, but that's just how it goes. And so they're doing their counter thing. The Zalbar hits, and Mission rolls her grenade and shoots it, which if you guys slow the animation down to 1x, that's what she's actually doing. Now, my opponent hadn't taken a lot of tenacity onto Zalbar, which was great for me because that meant that I was able to get stun off on him at will. And so you can see here I had taken Karth down to no protection, and that means that Zalbar passively taunts and has counter. And that's one of the frustrating things about the Old Republic team. But one thing I wanted to point out here, and I do this a little bit later, is whenever he taunts, one reason that it's really great to have First Order available for this squad is that he taunts, and he has counter, and that's not great. You can dispel it with Fox, like I just did. One other thing you can do is use First Order Officer to feed turn meter to First Order Stormtrooper. Now, First Order Stormtrooper, a lot of times will just do his taunt buff or whatever, but at times, and you'll see it a little bit later, he's able to dispel. As long as he has advantage, he can dispel. And so one really cool synergy thing that you kind of learn to do if you're using First Order a lot is you use First Order Officer to give turn meter to First Order Stormtrooper. But First Order Stormtrooper doesn't necessarily only gain turn meter, he also gains advantage. And whenever he has advantage, he can dispel on his basic. And so you can see every once in a while I'm able to feed from First Order Officer. I give it to First Order Stormtrooper. It also heals First Order Stormtrooper, it cleanses him, and then First Order Stormtrooper is able to just do a basic and clear a buff that you want to be able to take out. You know, I think I took one out already on L3 with his basic, and once you're able to do that's a really strong ability to be able to kind of choose when you're going to dispel, because maybe you're not keeping track of the cooldowns on First Order Stormtrooper or Fox or Kylo Ren on his stun, whatever, and so you're able to just give the advantage to First Order Stormtrooper, and it doesn't matter if he's on cooldown with his other abilities because he dispels on his basic. So in this match, you can see that I was kind of messing around with, just jumping around from one character to another. And a lot of that was because I got too close to their protection threshold where I was going to be able to go over their protection with a hit. And that, of course, triggers the Zalbar taunt and counter. And you want to be able to avoid that as much as possible. And so you only want the really hard hitters to be hitting guys past their protection so that you can get one hit, maybe get a one shot if you can get enough of their health. Just overall be able to do some good damage efficiently. Now, Zalbar is the one that's left, and every time you're hitting him, he's gaining defense, and, I'm not doing any damage. You guys can see I First Order Officer at gear 12 only did like 1,000 damage, and so you got to kind of lay off on the special attacks because those are going to reduce his turn meter, and you're just waiting for him to take a turn. He's on a double turn stun, and so after he takes a turn, he's still stunned, and then you can actually hit him for some good damage. And getting 60 banners here was definitely something I had expected to be able to do. So the front zones were gone. I had more complete information, and it was General Grievous with Watt and First Order with Barriss, and so that was okay. I wasn't necessarily happy about the General Grievous with Watt. Now, my opponent's Darth Malak was actually really fast. He was faster than either of our Badstillas, and I didn't really know how that was going to mess with the match, so I thought about it for a long time. It took a little bit of time just to think my way through that match, and after I did that, I decided that it wasn't probably going to be a huge issue. I wanted to be able to take my Darth Revan team still, and because my Darth Revan outsped my opponent, I would be able to get in a hit first, and that was going to be a huge deal. Our Badstillas were the exact same speed, and so there was kind of a coin flip situation going on, but I wasn't really that concerned. Even if their Badstilla was able to go first, I would definitely have more debuffs on me, but there wasn't necessarily like a great way for their team to take huge advantage of that. HK really likes that, of course, but I was going to be able to go first with my HK anyways, and so one thing I want to point out here too is you can see I've been toggling the buff and debuff thing. I'm trying to see which characters have fear, and I'm kind of operating around that. One thing that you want to note is that a lot of newer users of HK47 and the Darth Revan team, one mistake that they make a lot is just throwing their grenade right away. And I think that that's kind of a mistake in a lot of cases because that dispels fear. You kind of want to operate around fear and have like that kind of maximum turn efficiency thing. And so whenever someone is feared, I try to go around them and hit someone else if there's no like taunt or something forcing me to attack them. Or if their life is really low, I can maybe one-shot them with Marauder or something like that. But in the end, that kind of approach gets you 58 banners because uh, you're making your opponent take all of their turns or waste all of their turns under fear. And so whereas that grenade on HK is really tempting and it does a lot of damage, there are a lot of instances where you're best served by just bypassing the AoE and just doing a normal hit, which he does a lot of damage on his basic anyways. Now, this Grievous squad was a pretty interesting opportunity for me to be able to try out my Darth Jedi Revan counter against it. And I know that I almost always preach that I want to take Astila lead instead of Jedi Revan just because you have higher tenacity with her and you have a huge pool of extra protection. But Jedi Revan does a couple things better than her. All of their characters are a little bit faster, and Jedi Revan also, as the leader, has his strategic advantage or whatever that ability is on the far right corner. That he can just bypass a taunt. He can do that regardless, but then he can call someone in to be able to assist. And I wanted to be able to just try, kind of snipe Newt out without having to use his mark ability, because you want to be able to mark B2 first, and then once his ability comes around again, you want to be able to mark General Grievous a second time and be able to take him out. And you don't really have time to be able to do that against Watt, and so having an ability that can kind of just bypass the Magna Guard taunt is really big. And I was able to take out B2 relatively quickly. And then Magna Guard was, of course, taunting, but then he gave up his taunt, and I'm not really sure what that was all about. He didn't have his taunt there for a minute, and I think that was mostly because he wasn't naturally taunting. He was taunting because of Watt's ability that he bestowed at the very start, and because he was out of protection, he wasn't able to taunt on his own. And so you can see here, when I was using Jedi Revan, I was able to call an assist to Grandmaster Yoda, and we're trying really hard right now not to kill Magna Guard, because if Magna Guard goes, then General Grievous goes, and he does his blender move, and he could potentially wipe the entire squad, and you really just want to be really careful about that. And in the end, I did decide to just take out Magna Guard. I figured it was kind of inevitable that that was going to happen. And so I did take him out. I wasn't sure what to do with Jolie's ability here. I wanted to cleanse Grandmaster Yoda, which I think would have worked if I had put Resurrect on him or Revive, whatever. But I decided to bide my time because one of these Jedi would inevitably get destroyed by General Grievous or something, and I wanted to be ready to be able to revive instead of being on cooldown and having to wait a few more turns for Grievous to blender me further. Finally, I was able to get Mark back on with Jedi Revan, and once you get Mark on General Grievous, you just have to finish the fight then and there. If you can't, then you are probably just going to lose the match. And fortunately, he was only a Relic 3 General Grievous, and so he could have done a little more damage. I didn't actually use Savior at all this match, and so I feel like maybe I could take a little bit higher Relic level of Grievous right now. I don't necessarily know if Jedi Revan is going to be the answer here. I do like his ability to kind of bypass that taunt and be able to snipe Watt, but I don't know if it's worth giving up all that extra protection and tenacity from Bastila. At any rate, I was able to get a 57 banner win on my first try against this Grievous Watt team, and that was all I really wanted. And really, the only teams remaining, there was a First Order team that I was going to use Padme on, and Padme isn't like my very favorite counter for First Order. It seems a little bit like overkill, but also all of her courage abilities are going to be mostly wasted against the two Kylos. Like, I would actually have to take out their health pool on merit of their actual ability to punch and their offense stat, because the Kylos resist all of the percentage health based damage, and that means courage wouldn't be effective at all here. Now, courage would be effective against the other three characters, and so the goal here was to be able to take out the surrounding three non-Kylo characters, and once those three characters were gone, then I would hopefully just be able to focus down their health and be able to take them out. This is actually a kind of fun match thematically, just because Padme is Kylo's grandma, and So it's fun to see that even she disapproves of what he's doing. It kind of looks like he's stunned by that revelation. I'm funny. But, anyways, I was able to take him out. That was outside of my original plan, but being able to do a mass assist against him and then start working on cooldowns was too good of an opportunity to ignore. And then I was able to swat the other Kylo with Anakin, and overall, like this match really wasn't that challenging. I would be interested to see what it would be like against a higher relic level squad, but as it stood, they were only gear 12, and whereas gear 12 first order are fine, especially on offense, they don't necessarily leave a whole lot of opportunities for upsets if you know what you're doing against them. And so I did take them out for a little bit. I was thinking about doing an undersized squad with Treya against these Geos, but I decided that I needed to take a full squad, not only because I wanted to be able to win, and I didn't really care about the score. I also knew that this was almost just basically my last chance. Like, if I lost against this Geonosian squad by chance, then I was going to probably just lose the whole match, despite the fact that I had been one-shotting all these characters. One really good point in my favor here is that Thrawn was faster than their Geonosian Alpha or any of the other Geonosians, and so he was able to really quickly just hand a turn to Treya, who was able to isolate the Brute, which means that there wasn't going to be any taunts to be able to mess around with, and the Brute wasn't going to be able to be used as part of that part of the health pool, and also I wouldn't have to hit Brute any either, and so having a slower Geonosian squad to go against was a really nice side effect of this match. Usually, it's the other way around. Usually, I am outsped by quite a bit by the Geonosian Alpha, and I'm just happy that I had the opportunity to go first. I wanted to see what that felt like. So initially, when I was fighting these Geonosian squads, I thought that the best method was kind of to just focus on the Brood Alpha, and once you take him out, of course, the hive mind is gone, and the rest of the squad are sitting ducks or a fish in a barrel, or whatever metaphor you want to use to be able to convey the fact that you can kill them easily. But what I've discovered is that you want to take out the guys in the periphery. The Brood Alpha is usually the guy with the best gear, the one with the best mods, and therefore he's probably going to have a high degree of armor, and it's going to be tough to be able to take him out. Being able to take out like the Geonosian soldier on the side is great, because not only are you doing more damage, but once you get him down to a certain hit point threshold, you're also able to hopefully just one-shot him, and then even if you end up losing the match, which hopefully you don't, but if you end up losing the match, you want to be able to just finish off the rest of the squad without one of their remaining members. And so I was able to get 58 on my first try here. Mostly you could see at the end I was trying to just wait a little bit to be able to get just a little bit more protection in so that I could maximize my banners. And so it was that I was able to get the win here again. 1906 banners. I'm starting to appreciate any score that's above 1900. It used to be 1910, but I think that is kind of past. Of course, I like those scores, but it's not going to happen nearly as often these days. So we can take a look at my defenses. My Emperor Palpatine team was actually the only ones that were able to get any kind of defense going at all, but this was a pretty cool thing. All my other teams did a decent job of being able to steal banners, and really the only squad that didn't do anything, and my opponent was pretty disdainful of the squad in general just because my mods were kind of poor on it, was the General Skywalker squad, so I'm gonna have to do something about that as soon as possible. What I'm probably going to have to do is just remod him to be able to have a ton of protection, because my opponent said that they were able to just one-shot him or topple him with Commander Luke and Han, and that wasn't necessarily awesome at all to hear, but it was good feedback, and I really appreciate it. So with this win and a full clear, I was able to guarantee that I would be able to be into Khyber, no matter if I attacked my final opponent or did anything. As long as I deployed any kind of defense, I would get into Khyber, and that is really exciting. I felt excited. Not only was I able to get into Khyber for the third time, I also had an 11-0 record, of which I was quite proud.
And you ate a whole wheel of cheese? How'd you do that? It's actually, I'm not even mad. That's amazing.
And now I think I'm going to take off, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for the exciting conclusion to this Grand Arena Championship. So see how far I can get into Khyber. And remember that in all things, Xaereth prevails.